decolonizing the public space in different European cities. The discussions we had last year were really wonderful and so productive in understanding what is changing and what is remaining the same in Europe. And now we will have another dimension, and Patricia has accepted this invitation to give us some insights in her work. And we will be talking about two projects. Basically, she has done much more than this, of course, but I believe that for you, our audience, mostly coming from Germany, it could be interesting to hear what happened and what is currently happening in one smaller city in Germany, where Patricia has been involved in a project. The city's name is Braunschweig, and we will also hear some discussions around Berlin and what a monument, a decolonial monument, could look like. I think this is really interesting, Patricia, because normally in Germany we are used to think about the cities that took a lot of profit from colonial relations, the big ones, right? We think about colonialism being a problem or a spectrum in Hamburg and in Berlin, but not necessarily in the smaller cities. What I just learned from historians that they really call the Hinterland of Germany, so those places which are not necessarily at the center of the political debates, and still they are much more involved in colonial relations. So thank you for this, and thank you for taking the time to be with us. Let's begin with this project in Braunschweig. Take us to the different steps as they invite you to come, and what did you see in this city? Thank you. You have to unmute, dear Patricia, first.
Thank you for this beautiful introduction, both of you, by the way. The city of Braunschweig. Let me state first, I'm not so sure how the colonial landscape is in physically, the physical colonial landscape, how it is in Germany. But if I look at the Netherlands, if you become aware of how colonialism works, then the physical landscape is everywhere. You know, it's not necessarily in the major cities or because you know it's so deeply implemented and ingrained in the DNA of the Dutch culture and country that you see it everywhere, completely everywhere in the total landscape of the Dutch. So that's, you know, one thing. And I think I'm almost sure that the same goes for Germany. To answer your question about Braunschweig, it was an international competition, which of course in itself is very problematic, because how can you compete about millions of people who were murdered and who have suffered under colonialism and the violence of colonialism. But anyway, there was this international competition decolonizing the public space in Braunschweig. And a couple of artists were proposed. You know, it was not an open call, but there was a curatorial team who selected a couple of artists to hand over a proposal. And they chose my proposal, which of course is an honor and amazing. And the proposal I've handed over is, I can maybe say something about it, but there is a short pitch. Maybe we can first show the pitch so that you are kind of like have an idea, and then I can elaborate more on the pitch. Is that an idea?
Yes, before meanwhile, perhaps I tell a little bit of the context where this project is taking place, if you allow me, and you
Yeah,
can also make some additional comments if I miss something.
yeah.
But
Okay.
perhaps it's interesting to know that this city in Braunschweig has a monument commemorating the colonies lost from Germany after the so-called Versailles Vertrag. So 1919, Germany had to give the colonies in Africa, in Asia, to other European countries. And this monument was like a nostalgic colonial monument, in really prominent within the city center, as I read, and interesting also within a street, or at the end of the street, which has also been renamed from another context. The original name of the street before National Socialism was Kaiser Wilhelm Street.
Yes.
There's a lot of streets with that name. The Nazis changed the name, and after 45, I believe, or 46, the city decided to change the name, not back to Kaiser Wilhelm, but to another politician who was persecuted by the Nazis. I think this is really interesting to know, because so many initiatives tried today in Germany to change problematic street names. And the reaction has been that no, names are names, right? And they cannot be changed. And you just have to look to the same national history of this country to see that changing names is possible and already happened. So this is the context of the geography where this monument is placed. Perhaps, Katarina, if you are great. Now we will see what Patricia has done with it. Okay, thank you for sharing this video with us. I was fortunate enough to see it before, and I was thinking many artists are not as transparent with their ideas as you are. So you really tell us every detail. Many artists try to keep this for themselves, or they say, no, it's up to interpretation. Would you develop a little on the mirrors, and why is this fragmented reflection so important for you?
Thank you for this question. And thank you also for adding the information, because as you say, it's very, very important to know. The monument actually was also replaced. It was also placed in a different space, because after fascism lost its popularity. It was placed in a different spot, and now it is, and then it was returned to the place where it is now. And this whole idea of the decolonizing the public space actually comes from the public itself. There were people protesting against the monument. There were a lot of protests of the Black Lives Matter movement. Recently, actually, the monument again was, I don't want to call it vandalized, but there was like a really critical intervention on the monument um, against the uprising of neo-fascism. So there's a lot of things happening around that monument, which is, I think, fantastic. That people do not. They want to hear the monument to represent a different story. So the idea of this whole proposal, and also the concept of the what the committee wanted was that the monument should stay, and also they said, like, let's not remove the monument, but let's do something with the monument where we add a critical reflection on German's colonial history without erasing the monument. And I think my standpoint is that I'm always very specific in when you should erase something and when not, because sometimes you need to bring down a sculpture of Cecil Rhodes, no question about it, bring it down. Um, in the Netherlands, we have one, Piet Hein. There's a lot of discussion about it because descendants of the people he murdered, he was responsible for the killings of hundreds and thousands of people um, in Southeast Asia.
Okay. Mhm.
And those descendants are living in that area, and every day they have to pass that monument. Of course, you have to, you know, get rid of that monument. But this particular monument, I thought, like, yes, I understand that you want to keep it and give a critical reflection to it because there is already so much happening around that monument. It's already changing because of the active participation and protest of the people of Braunschweig. So I I chose the Black Mirror because in my work, what I also find very important is always think of ways of healing. How can I implement something in the work I do, which also offers hope and possibilities of healing from this colonial wound? Because, we can be, of course, we can be sad and we need to grieve and we need to mourn, about all these lives that have been lost. But in the end, we also need to heal from this colonial wound together. And when I mean together, I mean white people and black people and people of color. We all need to heal from this colonial wound in order to move forward. Um, so the Black Mirror has a double meaning. On the one hand, it shows actually a very dark side of yourself. You are confronted with, you know, something you actually do not want to see of yourself. But once you're confronted with that dark side of yourself, that moment in itself is acknowledging something. And that gives also a possibility of healing yourself from this, yeah, dark part. Um, and that's why I have these mirrors standing around surrounding the monument. It changed a little bit, by the way, the proposal, and it had to do with technical things. Instead of 5 mirrors, there are 3 mirrors now, but still the idea is still the same. Um, that the monument is visually broken because I was not allowed to touch the monument. I wasn't allowed to do anything with it, but I still wanted to release its negative energy, do something with the negativity of the power and the oppression and everything it represents to break that open. Because if we release that negative energy, then something positive can come from it and can take it over. And the positive thing is the stories of the resistance heroes. I did like extensive research on resistance heroes, as many as I could find. And of course, there are many, many more, but there is only so much space and also money. um, and when you do research, then you also see that a lot of the histories are written from a dominant male perspective. There are hardly any women. Well, of course, we know that there were also female resistance heroes. Um, so I thought, like, how can I implement the feminist story, the feminist part in this history? So I decided to change the narratives, even though they are historically accurate. I all had them told from a female perspective. So it's either a mother speaking, a wife, a daughter, but even a sacred snake, a mountain, a river, all feminine um, entities who have a spiritual meaning in certain cultures because they are feminine. And this was my way to implement also this feminine voice into the whole proposal of and also the stories of these resistance heroes.
Yes. So you are talking about the audio tracks which will be able to be listened to with a
QR
smartphone
code.
or something.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, you can just, they will be, they are in German and in English. So they are
Mhm.
in two languages, and you can listen to the stories, but all the stories are also, you can also read the stories on the website. There will also be, it's also possible to read them while you're listening, or maybe read them afterwards. Yeah, and I sincerely hope that, because there is also a school in the vicinity of the monument, and they are very active. They did really active projects, anti-colonial projects with the monument, with the children, which I thought was amazing. So my hope is that also, the school will do something with the stories. That it will become maybe part of their history lessons. There is also a fantastic group, anti-colonial group, in Braunschweig. They call the AMO group. They are named after Anton, and they also do decolonial tours in Braunschweig. And I've already approached them, and I really want them also to do these decolonial tours and incorporate the new part of the new story of the monument in their tours. And what is also amazing is that there used to be a tree standing on the premises of the memorial, but the tree was sick, so it had to be cut down. And then I
Mhm.
asked a German artist to tell the story, the colonial story of the monument and German colonialism from the perspective of the tree.
Mhm.
So we hear the stories of the resistance heroes, but we also hear a German voice talking about German colonialism, but from a perspective of the tree.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for this. I mean, there are a lot of inspiring ideas. I would like to ask you if you could develop on two of them. The first was you mentioned the monument being moved. Yes, I did mention this. So at the beginning, it was built, I think, as you told us, at the place where it is now. But some also, I read it is really contradictory. I mean, the National Socialists didn't like the iconography or the artistic style of this monument, so they put him somewhere where they cannot see it, although it
Yes.
was a nostalgic colonial monument. But if you see it, I saw it once also, being a really young student, and I really didn't connect it automatically with the
Mhm.
colonies. Have you heard something about this exoticism of lions in Europe? Have you noticed? I'm curious about how come that lions and elephants are so welcomed in European cities, whereas black bodies are not.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good question. There was actually a fantastic black scholar from the Netherlands who wrote about these lions, how these lions are everywhere in the Western society, are incorporated in their culture, actually cultural appropriation at the
Yeah.
worst part, and even also in a way that people tend to forget that the lion actually is part of the African culture, of the African continent, and um, yeah, but I I really have to think about it because I don't have the paper in my head, but it is extremely problematic. I agree. How the lion is sort of like appropriated, how it is used, and of course the lion being a symbol of power. I kind of like understand that Europeans, use that symbol of power because a lot of European culture is based on wanting power, and wanting to rule over others and seeing themselves as superior. And the lion stands, of course, symbol for them, for that superiority. While the lion in many cultures has a completely different meaning, hasn't anything to do with superiority the way Europeans think about it. Uh, but yeah, I agree. It's very problematic that this lion is just appropriated as if yeah, if it doesn't have a soul or meaning of itself, huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
And Patricia, you mentioned that you were not able to touch the monument. Has this something to do with cultural heritage or something, or what was the reason they gave you?
It was actually what I understood is that the municipality also spoke with the surrounding people and also with the people with the communities, and they all agreed that the monument, because there is so much uproar at the monument, it's really a symbol of protest. A lot of things are happening at the monument, not to
Mhm.
remove it, but to leave it there. So it still can be a place of protest and gathering, but that the meaning of the monument can change because we add something to it. So
Yes.
we tell a different story, which in this case I think I find very interesting. Because if we eliminate all if the complete colonial landscape of Europe, um, that can be very problematic because Europe in itself already suffers from colonial aphasia. It doesn't, it's still kind of like mystifying what it did for hundreds of years to millions of people.
Mhm.
Um, we keep on talking about the Second World War, which of course is horrible. I'm not saying no people deserves what happens to the Jews, absolutely not. But we tend to forget, like if we talk about the colonial modernity project, we talk about more than 80 million people who are murdered. 80 million more. How come we don't talk about that? you know? So this is, for me, what I find so incredible, that there is still such a complete denial on what happened to millions and millions of people.
There's a partial denial, I would say, because going back to what you said, I mean, all these changes in the landscape have been done also because of the local initiatives, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
this is what I have been also reading in the last years, that there have been always local diasporic, as you say in your language, communities that have pushed authorities to change the landscape and to create moments where also they feel included in what a national narrative may be, and perhaps to develop a little bit on that, because you have mentioned the Anton Amo initiative, which is a great grassroots initiative named after the first scholar in Germany, right? The first black person who wrote a PhD in the 16th century. And he's not remembered, of course, and the university lost also his PhD, which is just amazing. And so, what do we do with these hierarchies, Patricia? Because there's always the local community with less resources, right?
Mhm.
Who are working almost 20 years, so two generations almost, to change something. And then we have the municipality, the museum, right, which have the budget also to do this. How do we navigate these hierarchies, or how do you navigate these hierarchies? Perhaps you want to develop a little bit in relation to the monument in Berlin, if you want.
Yeah. What I think is important is that we keep in mind that we are not working for alone for our own generation. You know, we need to transcend this period of time, and we need to think of future generations. And I always, I'm very much related and fond of many indigenous cultures, the wisdom of indigenous cultures, that you do not think about your own and your own ego and your own well-being, not alone. Your own well-being always is in relation to the other. Relationality is very, very important. So even though it might look like we do a lot of work and the successes are not immediately visible, it's not about immediate success. You do it because you transcend the now and you go beyond, you go beyond the now and you're thinking of future generations. And then time it gets a different meaning. you know. Um, I'm talking about then about deep time and big time, deep time, big time, and also big love. It's bigger than yourself, always. Um, and if you think about that, if you think about that, it needs to transcend yourself. It takes away a lot of frustrations, and also it takes away the expectations of instant success, because we live in a generation, with mobile phones and internet, a swipe generation who wants everything instantly. Uh, and with a lot of things, it's just impossible. A lot of things take a lot of time, a lot of patience, and a long, long breath. But um, in the end, things will change, things will move. And for me, the best example is always my ancestors who were involuntarily displaced or kidnapped. And if I look at the culture that came out of nothing, out of the ashes, they created a place of love, new languages, new clothing, food. If you look at Black culture right now, it's the best expert product for everything, Black culture. And it came out of oppression. So we should not forget that. We should not forget that the truth lies with the oppressed, and that out of uh, oppression, a lot of beauty can come forward.
Thank you, Patricia. I would just encourage our audience to look up in a world map where Suriname is, and to see how other connections of the world pop up. Yes, which we do not necessarily have present in our radar, right? Yes.
Mhm,
So thank you for this. And perhaps you would like to develop a little bit on your experience in Berlin.
mhm,
Just a short information for the people who are listening to us. You are more than welcome to write your comments or questions in the chat, and Katarina and I will be curating them. But at the end, you can also just raise your hand, and we will be happy to hear your voice and your comments or questions.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Berlin. This was also an international open call for artists all over the world. Also, artists from the Global South were encouraged to hand over a proposal for a decolonial memorial in Berlin, Neukölln, at Berlin Global Village, which is actually two buildings where several NGOs are housed. And it took them around about 5 years to get everything organized, to get the funding and yeah, to get everything done. But in the end, and it was again, of course, um, people from the marginalized groups and the Black communities who initiated it. Um, and I have a history in Berlin together with Rolando Vasquez and Jeanette Ehlers, very close friends. We were affiliated with Bebop, the Black Your Body Politics, which was organized by Alana Lockhart. And she is sorry, she's not amongst us anymore. She was an amazing Dominican scholar, and she brought together decolonial thinkers, artists, and it was for Jeanette and myself actually groundbreaking to be with this group of people. And suddenly we knew how to articulate our own work. We were already making certain work, but we couldn't fit in a tradition, in a West European tradition. We couldn't articulate what we were doing. And when we met Alana and we became part of the Bebop, we knew. Alana died, unfortunately, in 2019. And when um, this possibility came up, I phoned Rolando and Jeanette, and I said, "Shall we propose? And let's become a collective." and let's call each other the Luckward Collective, you know, to honor Elena. And she would have loved it. And so that's what we did. And we hand over a proposal, and then Elena Quintarelli, who was the assistant of Alana, became our assistant because we had a whole relationship with her also, and it was beautiful. We had a beautiful collaboration, um, and we had so much fun. And despite the difficulties, oh my God, German bureaucracy. Um, so yeah, so we created Earth Nest, and Earth Nest is actually a memorial of hope and healing. We wanted to have it partially underground, the memorial, also to move away from sculptures which are elevated on a pedestal, colonial sculptures which are elevated on a pedestal to honor, you know, so-called colonial
Yeah,
heroes.
masculinities, toxic masculinities, I
Masculinity.
call them.
So we really wanted the memorial to be you know, underground, but it was not possible. That was our first proposal. And the jury said, well, it's not possible because there's a whole infrastructure underground and you cannot, you know, it's not possible. Um, but we like your idea. It's very bold. So you know, we were in the second round after that, you know, even though they said like, no way you can do this. So think it further. You get another chance. So we were in the second round, the last 20. And then we said like, okay, let's see if we can do it partially underground then. And we also worked, by the way, with a German architect who is a friend of ours and who also helped us with the technical drawings. And then it became Earth Nest, and Earth Nest is actually a combination between the architecture of Cameroon, the Mousgroen architecture, which is really a beautiful, conic shaped architecture made of mud. And it's predominantly women who create these beautiful, yeah, I wouldn't call it huts. They live in these houses, but they are, you should look it up, the Mousgroen
Yes, like yeah,
from
their
Cameroon.
homes.
It's so beautiful. It's
Katarina, if you
stunning.
could show us some pictures, that would be awesome. Yeah. So that the audience sees this. This is another thing. She will
No,
come
this is
to
not,
this.
this
Yes.
is, no.
Perhaps this one. Yes,
Yeah.
great. Hmm.
So this is what we did. This is Earth Nest. And the Mousgroen has actually the similar shape. And then we also looked at the weaving birds. You know, the weaving birds who use straws of weaving their nest. And we also wanted to use the metaphor of weaving to weave different communities from former colonized countries to weave them together. Because one of the things that colonialism did is create separation. Um, it was dividing and rule, and it is separating us. And we thought, like, let's see if we can create a space where people can meet, can gather. As you can see, there is a seat where people can sit. Um, and there are steps that go down. And if you take one photo back, yeah, and there are 12 niches. And in the niches, you see again the violet light. Violet is the symbol of healing. And in the niches, if you go back, are 12 jars of black clay. One back, I
The
think.
first one, the first
First
picture.
one. Yeah,
This one,
this
yes.
one. And this is made by an indigenous community in Oaxaca, in Mexico. And they are the only ones who are allowed to work with this particular kind of clay because it comes from a sacred cave. And they developed these 12 jars, which are put in the niches. And we invite people from former European colonies, not only German, because we thought, like, let's expand it to Europe, to bring soils from their ancestral grounds and add it to the jars. And we also said that everybody can choose in which jar they want to put the soil. So all the soils are also connected together again, you know, and we're not going to create separation, but we bring all the soils together, and bringing them together is also a form of healing. And then there is also a sonic part where people can listen to stories of people who added soils to the jars and their ancestral stories in relation to the soils that they took from their homelands. But of course, we also have people who come from diasporic communities and who do not, yeah, who are no longer related to their ancestral grounds. So
Mhm.
they can also, of course, bring soils from their communities in Europe, which maybe are important to them, or yeah, where they maybe have stories which are also ancestral, because a lot of ancestral heritage, if you are from the diaspora, is also in Europe.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for this. So this monument should be, or is already, sorry, it opened 2 years ago, right? Or
No, the final inauguration where we added actually soil from the birth ground of Anton Wilhelm Amo and
wow, from
Fort
Ghana?
Elmina. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, there was one woman who brought soils from that area. She came from Ghana, and so that's really, really beautiful. And people can uh, hand over, if you go to the website of Berlin Global Village, you can, there is a very simple form, and then you can sort of like fill in the form and say that you want to add soils. And then Berlin Global Village will arrange, there will be a day where the soils can be added. We really want people to apply for it because we do not want to have the wrong kind of people adding soils, particularly with neo-fascism, you know, uh, going on right now. So that there is really a clear distinguishment, and that we can really, also Berlin Global Village can see, okay, these people are serious and they come with soils from their territories. And with the soils are often also ceremonies. People can also come add the soils with their own ceremonies from their own culture,
Mhm.
own cultures.
Yes. So this monument is also conceived and planned as a place of gathering, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And we had actually 25 of February, we had like the final ceremony. We had a couple of ceremonies, but the 25th of February was actually, a closure of the whole project, also with a beautiful ceremony. And now we said to the communities, it's up to you to decide if you want to have one particular date to bring the souls together, because we felt as artists that it was not up to us to decide, because we are not based in Germany, we don't live in Berlin, and we don't live with the communities.
Mhm.
So we suggested to communities, it's better that you as a group decide which date, should be a good date to add souls to the memorial.
Mhm. And perhaps a little uncomfortable question, I don't know, not for you, but for the city of Berlin. Is it really accessible? Because I have the impression it's between buildings. What would you say? Do tourists see the building, the monument, or do you really have to know it exists to go and look for it?
It is between two buildings. It's a bit, yeah, I agree. It looks a bit like secluded, but it is in a public space. If you there is a square opposite it, then in the summertime there's terraces, people sitting on the terrace. So if you sit on the terrace and you look to the left or to the right, whatever,
You will not miss it.
you can see it. And there is Kindle, which is an art space, which is very close by. Um, Actually, if you want to enter Berlin Global Village, you have to pass through the memorial also, because it also functions a bit like a gate. There are two openings. So it's very easy accessible. Yeah.
Okay, okay. And is this still a monument in the making, right? So it will not be finished, or what would you say? It's an unfinished
The
monument?
monument in
Yes.
itself ongoing. It's ongoing, yeah, because people can continue with adding soils, and it's actually what I find interesting. I call it a living monument. It's not like a static
Yes.
physical thing. Yeah, a part of it's of course is static, but the ceremonies and the adding of the soils make it a living monument, which I think is very important. It's a completely different concept from colonial monuments. And people can also add stories, you know. There's also a possibility to record a story with your iPhone and send it to Berlin Global Village, and then it will also be placed on the website, and other people can listen to your story. So it's ongoing. Yeah.
Great. So Katarina has also shared a link of the project Global Village in the chat if you want to learn more, or the next time you're in Berlin, do not miss to go there and visit the place. Um, yes, so you have given us really two wonderful insights in what monuments may be, because we tend to see
Mhm.
them as dead objects which are not being moved, which have to be removed from a public space if we want to change. But no, you say that there's also possibilities of negotiating or exchanging the meaning or transforming what they are supposed to do, and so to engage in a dialogue. And I think that's really important also for new generations to understand that history is not a book you cannot unwrite or write
Mhm.
anew, right? So we have to empower ourselves a little bit more with our street names, with
Mhm.
our places, and yes, to reclaim perhaps a more transparent dialogue or more inclusive dialogue.
Mhm. Mhm.
Would you say that you have experienced the same culture of negotiation or the same problems in both countries you have been working now? I mean, you have also been involved in a really big project in Utrecht, also a city that is struggling to remember its involvement with slavery and colonialism. So, would you say that there are some phases, some steps in this process which are the same, or would you have you find some differences between the Netherlands and Germany regarding what is possible in the
Mhm.
public space?
Yeah, if you work with public space, you have 9 out of 10 times there's problems with the public. Um, and in Berlin, it was not so much because what was happening there was that because actually the monument stands on the ground, which is actually owned by Berlin Global Village.
Mhm.
So, which is actually good because particularly now with the political climate, it's going to be very difficult to have this removed because it's really on their ground and they own it, and you know. Um, but in Utrecht, it's was really public space. It is the monument is in a park. And of course, we live in a democracy, so people have like 6 weeks to protest or, to file a complaint or anything. And of course, that happens.
Mhm.
Um, and then there was a whole discussion also in the council of the movie, which became very, very emotional, very heated. People were angry, screaming, crying. Um, and then I was asked in an interview my opinion about it, and I said, like, yeah, this is exactly what it needs to be. It needs to be emotional. When we talk about uh, 350 years of killing, murdering, and oppressing people, it should be emotional. You cannot take a neutral position. Um, Even though the emotions of certain politicians were a bit weird. Um, but because there were, of course, emotions opposing against the monument.
Mhm.
Um, but still, I thought like it's good. It's good that there is a debate, that there is a discussion, and that because if there's something I really dislike is when people are taking a neutral position in this history, and I've seen it too often. But there was a really, really good politician. She was amazing. She was like, she was very firm, and she said, like, listen, they fought for this community. It was again a black community. They fought for this monument for 7 years, more than 7 years. They fought for it. And luckily, the political wind was changing in the Netherlands. And then finally, they said yes. She said, these voices, we haven't listened to these voices for ages. We've listened to your voices. She points to white people. We've listened to your voices. You are always there. You always have a big mouth. Now you need to shut up. And now it's time to listen to the voices that have been silenced. And no, I'm not going to listen to you, she said. She was amazing. And she said the monument is going to be there, and they deserve it. They fought for it, and it's going to be there. Uh, yeah, she was like, I really liked her. But of course, we had problems, always. Yeah, always. That's what you have when you work with a team, when you work in public space. Mistakes are made. But what I always do, um, I always work also with monuments before they're placed. I make sure that the ground is blessed. I always work with a Winti priest. We bless the ground. We ask the ancestors for permission before we do anything. You always have to ask permission if it's okay, if the ancestors agree to that particular spot. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So that's what we did. We had a ceremony with my Winti priest. Winti is a nature religion from Suriname. You can compare it with Candomblé or with Voodoo. And we really cleanse the place, and we ask permission before we start building. And then everything will go well. Even the problems will be solved. And they did. We had a lot of problems, really technical problems also. But in the end, everything is solved because you have permission from the ancestors.
Oh, Patricia, this is wonderful, but you're so optimistic with this painful subjects. That gives me also energies to continue.
Yeah, you should, You should always try to, even though, I'm not gonna say that I didn't have my moments of despair, because, oh my God, it's hard work if you work with these topics, and if you are very much involved in decoloniality, because if you look through a decolonial lens, then you cannot see the world otherwise. And that makes you lonely sometimes.
Yes, yes, definitely. It reminds me also of some quotes I recently read in a book dealing exactly with the subjects we are discussing. Compilation. I mean, I can just only recommend some of the articles inside, but it's called Cultural Heritage and Slavery. And in this book, they also talk about many initiatives, as we just did today, right? So it's always about racialized initiatives, having the motivation and the energies to engage in these discussions, in changing our reference, our names, the people we are celebrating in the public space of our cities, which are much more multicultural as they want to accept themselves, right? So we shared this history, is also part of the idea in the code of conduct of Osara. And what this make of us when we think about a shared heritage is that it carries with it an expectation of equal possession of the past, both in relation to production of the historical narrative and access to the spaces of representation. And I believe that we have touched upon some of the problems with this idea, right? It's not only shared, it's also painful. We do not share the same trauma, but it's also an emotional subject which globalizes the world, and not only emotional, of course, it's ideological and economical and so on. But in a sense, we are connected through this logic, right? There's a shared heritage that divides us. And
But I think if I may interrupt you,
yes,
to
of
be
course.
clear, there is a shared heritage.
Mhm.
I agree. There is something, and we need to heal from it, but we do not necessarily need to heal together.
Yes, okay.
Because
Mhm.
I think I really sincerely believe that black and brown bodies have a different trauma from white bodies.
Yes,
White bodies need to find a different way of healing. They also need to heal. Absolutely. They also need to heal because, it's not easy to have ancestors, to come from that heritage. So they also need to heal. But we do not need to heal together. It needs to be separate, the healing.
yes, completely agree. Yes, the
Yeah.
problem is finding those spaces, right? And
Yeah.
being legitimate enough to fight for those spaces, or yeah. But anyway, this has been already wonderful. I am wondering if our audience wants to ask something. Perhaps Katarina wants to jump in. Otherwise, we could make another chapter, open another chapter, yes, in this discussion. What do you say, Katarina?
Yeah, I thank you so much to both of you. It's already amazing. I think we could just go on for hours. But yeah, I would give the space also to the audience. So in case the audience, you have any questions to ask to either Tanya or Patricia, please either you can put them in the chat if you like to, if you prefer to, or as it was mentioned before, you can also raise up your hand and switch on your camera
As
as
you
you
wish.
prefer.
Yes.
Um, you can also give them a little minute, maybe. But
Verena,
yeah,
maybe?
maybe I can also like just ask one question,
Mhm.
which I also
Mhm.
had for you, Patricia, because I know that you also worked well solo, but also in a collective, and I was wondering how like the different approaches and the different also yeah um, yeah, well, how the different approaches in work experience, but also cultural practices is a crucial thing for you for shaping a decolonial process.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, good question. Well, with the collective, we know each other so well and for such a long time, and we are so deeply involved in decoloniality, that yeah, what is the beauty of working together is, um, you never work from ego. You always work from wanting to do something together and bringing each other to heights, because it's not about the I, it's always about the us and the we. And if you all have that same sense, then there is never a conflict. We never ever had a conflict about anything, because there is so much love and mutual respect, because we all saw very clearly that we could look beyond the self. And if you can work like that, it's such a pleasure. Really, I love it. I love working like that. I love to collaborate in general with people. I work a lot with people. I just love to collaborate. But sometimes I just need to work alone, because yeah, it's just that sometimes it's also good to do things by yourself, and to work for yourself. But I just love to collaborate. It's so much more fun. Um, if people understand it, if they understand the true meaning of collaboration, and the true meaning of collaboration, that is very important, that it's never about the I, but always about the we.
Thank
Yes,
you.
on those are the pronouns also chosen by Patricia for a
Yeah,
reason. Yes,
yeah.
it's wonderful. Not the impersonal they, perhaps, but more the personal we. So I think this could be on because you mentioned the collaboration. It could be a good moment to hear perhaps one of the tracks I did for the museum. You also heard them, and I believe it. yeah, it's a good opportunity to close with it, perhaps also as a example of a collaboration, because a project like this cannot be done by one person. And as you mentioned, is always also acknowledging that we are not the first generation who is doing this kind of memory work. Yes. So, Katerina, if you would like to share the second track, you will hear work made by myself and my colleagues, Katarina Pelosi, and two of my students who gave their voice to this project. And it's about unsettling the nostalgic history around the Ethnological Museum in Hamburg. I'm happy that you also can follow. You already heard them, and you told me that you have a notion of German, but you don't really need an access to the language to understand a little bit what it's about. And after our talk, I think it's so important that we also talk a little bit about the importance of mentioning and learning those names, right? Which you have also collected, carefully collected in your contra monument, para monument, if I may call it like this. Yes, so I think that is a really painful continuity that in Germany there's much problems in pronouncing non-German names, and that this also creates a problem of communication. So I mentioned in this track Abu Shidi bin Salem. Can you talk about one person that touched your soul while doing this project for Braunschweig, or somebody else? So what we need to remember as a decolonial memory?
Yeah, I was actually by all impressed, but I was also very impressed by Muhu Musa from the Nyabinge. And she also was a spiritual leader. From the Nyabinge group is a spiritual group in East Africa, not only Tanzania, but the borders were of course different. And she was also participating in the Maji Maji War. And the legend says that they could turn the bullets into water. The bullets of the colonizer, they can turn it into water. And she was fearless, Mumu Musa. She was also called, her nickname was the Lioness of Lisabi. And actually, a lot of the people from Jamaica, so they still honor her, because she was wearing dreadlocks and she's fearless, and she kind of like is still a very sacred person for many Black people, and particularly the people in Jamaica. Let me think. I have to think because there are so many stories, but she's one of my
Yes.
I cannot say favorite because that's not really honest, but
It's not a
yeah,
competition, yes.
yeah. They are, yeah, um let me see if I can have another one.
While you search, I can also tell our audience that if they want, they can hear the tracks. There's another one which deals much more about the history of the museum in Hamburg, and with the project of renaming themselves, which took place in 2020, I believe. Yes. So you can go to their webpage, or you can just Google Der Riss zwischen den Lügenfüßen, and that's the name of the project. Yes, because a
Yeah,
lion, it's also in front of the museum, of course. So
yeah, yeah.
you find the same iconography.
Yeah, I was also thinking that's why I had to think, because we often are focused on the African continent, but what a lot of people do not know that the Samoa Islands were also colonized by Germany, and there was the Ponape Rebellion, which was a very important rebellion, and the Soke Rebellion. Um, and those they were like really fighting against German colonizers also, and they won. And I'm looking for his name. Oh, sorry, I'm so terrible, but it sounds
No
so.
worries, no worries. Yes, you give us already a lot of information. Solomon Island, it wasn't on my radar neither.
And then, of course, there was also China, Qin Wen from China, who also fought against German colonizers. Let me see. Oh, of course, yeah, Witbooi, but I don't like the name Witbooi because it's a colonial name.
Colonial name, yes.
Uh,
It's a figure from Namibia.
yeah, he's from Namibia.
Yes.
So he is also incredible. But the stories are also sad, because many of them they fought and they were also erased. And many of literally also that the bodies were erased. And I remember, I think it was, if I am correct, it was Sumadou, and he was from yeah, he was also from the Soke people from the Soke rebellion, and he was actually expelled to another island away from his family for a very long time, and just imagine that you come from a community where the communal is very important, and then you are isolated from your community. That was one of the harshest punishments, yeah, they could get. So,
Also, probably as the life of Mangabel, as he
yeah,
came to
Mangabel,
Germany.
I have Maharero, Nuga
But these are biographies people may listen while in Braunschweig. When would this audio installation be put into place, Patricia?
Yeah, we are working on it right now. Actually, I have this amazing guy from Cameroon who is managing the recordings. And that's also something I think of in my art practice. How can I incorporate people from former colonies as ways of restitution? You know, because he is managing that. And actually, there's a whole team of people from the former German colonies who are doing the translation, who are checking the names. There is a voice also from a woman from Cameroon, and he is also from Cameroon. And they all get paid, and they get well paid. I don't do minimum wages. I think that's ridiculous. They get well paid. And he was like, first he said like, oh, I'm not sure. Can I ask this amount? I said, if this is what you need, then you should ask it. Because I see it as a form of repair as well. You can also think of that. As an artist, there are several different ways of participating in repair and reparation. So in my projects, I always think of ways like how can I incorporate people from marginalized communities, from former colonies, and to make sure that the privileged people actually are paying for the marginalized people.
That's
Huh?
a little
That's
bit about resource transfer, so to say.
Yeah, research transfers. Yeah, that's something I'm very, very keen on. So yeah, this is I'm looking for I have one file with all the
With
names.
all the okay.
Yeah, but
Look for it. Look for it. I
my
will give you
my
some
computer is
moment.
chaos.
Yes, we are almost done with our time. We have 3 minutes left. If you have any question, remark, comment, just feel free to join the discussion. I see Verena has her micro unmuted. Do you want to say something or? Okay. Yes, so thank you, Katarina, also for sharing much more information, perhaps put in the link of, yeah, the tracks at the chat. And if perhaps Sonia would like to join us, I don't know. I see. Very important people here at the chat. Nice to read your names, and I hope you enjoyed. And Patricia has found perhaps the.
Yeah, I have the files here. Well, I can give you some titles of the stories because, like I said, I wanted the voices of the women incorporated as well.
Yes.
So we have the plea of Sesembu, and she was the mother of Mangi Meli. And then we have the story of Muhu Musa, and she was the incarnation of Queen Nyabingi's defiance. Um, then we have Nafanuas. Nafanua, she is the warrior goddess of Samoa, and she tells the story of the people of Soke from Samoa.
Wow.
I'm just giving a couple of examples because there are 18 stories in total. So
That's amazing. Thank you for doing also this archival work.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
fascinating. I mean, it's
yeah.
another relation as historians have with the archive, you know?
Yeah, I always, I don't know if you heard of Saidiya Hartman.
Of course.
Of course you do. Yeah. And
Author from the States who is really recommended for everybody.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Batman.
Saidiya Hartman, she talks about critical fabulation. And if you understand the notion of critical fabulation, then you read the archive in a completely different way. Then you also read what is not written. Then you can understand what is actually between the empty spaces
Okay.
between the words. Because so many voices are not heard and not implemented in the archives. So we need to create. We use our imagination in a way, to read between the lines and understand what is not written, but what could have been written if their voices were implemented.
I would just add that we also have to develop a little bit more our uh, um, capacity to listen. That's why I meant also with not pronouncing names correctly and so on. Yes, we have to listen to one another more carefully.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and the naming, that's also, of course, a very problematic thing because if we look at the African continent, it was carved up during the scramble for Africa like a cake. Communities were separated from each other. So you have like sometimes 5 different spellings of a name.
Yes.
Um, because a lot of the stories are actually pre-colonial. So how do you not pre-colonial, but we're fighting against the colonial war, and we're before the scramble of Africa already taking place. There was a lot of fights taking place already. So finding out what is the correct spelling is very complex in itself. And then, of course, there is like a European spelling of an African name. And then there are the African continent has 3,000 different dialects. So just imagine, to find out which is the correct spelling. So I have decided that I'm going to put a disclaimer on the website because there are absolutely, let's say, quote unquote mistakes, or people are saying like, no, it should be spelled like this or that. So yeah. So but what I also did is as much as possible as I could find to really use the original names which they got from their mothers or from their ancestors and not the European names. So also from Hendrik Witbooi, I found this original name, not the European name. So this name is also going to be placed in the monument.
That's
Not the European name.
yes. This is
Because I
also
think,
the case of Mangabell and so on.
yeah, yeah, it's very important that we do that. Yeah. It's a way of reclaiming it. It's a way of reclaiming your not only your history but also identities. Yeah. So that's yeah.
Great, great, Patricia. There was a question about some literature of healing in different spaces, POC spaces and white spaces. Would you recommend something, or would you say that people should keep on searching
I
for
can
other
recommend
guidances? Yes.
yeah, I can recommend one book which I thought was brilliant. He's a trauma therapist. His name is Resma Menakem. And the book is called My Grandmother's Hands.
Migrants, mother,
My
heads,
Grandmother's Hands.
hands.
Yeah,
Okay.
from Resma Menakem. And if you go to, there's a wonderful podcast on being. It's my favorite podcast. And there's a brilliant interview with him on that podcast.
Great. What's the name of the podcast again?
On being.
All
On
being,
being, as
on
in what
being,
it means
on
to be a human being, on being. And it's like all kinds of interviews. And there's also one with him. But his book is brilliant. My Grandmother's Hand from Resma.
Great, yes. Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for this addition. And there was also a comment about the exhibitions. Did you get it, Katharina, or should I?
Yeah, I can read it out loud. It's public monuments and exhibitions are great ways to educate and build a remembrance culture around German colonialism. What could be other ways to make this knowledge more mainstream and more accessible?
But is that that's a question? Sorry?
Yeah, that's a question. I think you can reread it if you want. I will
Yeah.
just spontaneously say exactly what we have been doing here are ways of opening those exhibitions and spaces. I mean, working with audio tracks also give the opportunity of people who cannot mobilize and go there or just don't want to be in the open space also to engage in at least one-size dialogue. They can also give some feedback again. I mean, yes, I think that would be a way of unsettling the hierarchy of seeing and being seen. Yes.
Yeah, and I also think as a cultural body, I think it's really important that we place our bodies deliberately in those spaces and disrupt those spaces. And it might sometimes be scary or uncomfortable, but then don't go alone. Go with somebody if you find it difficult to go alone. But I do it deliberately. I deliberately disrupt these white spaces, these white cubes, these white spaces with my black body. And to create a sense of discomfort, because that sense of discomfort also creates a certain awareness. I will give you an example. I went to the Concertgebouw in Amsterdam, which is a famous concert hall, and there was a classical music. It was, I think, something from Bach, and I went there, and I was the only black person, the only one. And of course, people are trying not to move their head and look at me, but I know they want to look at me. But I do it deliberately because classical music is also part of my history. So I am allowed and entitled to be there and to enjoy Bach if I want to. And that's also what I always say to my students, to my black students. Go deliberately to those white spaces because you have all the right to be there. It's your culture as well.
And the white society can, of course, solidarize with those actions, right? And make space and reward their way of their gaze, their colonial gaze, and so on. Yes, are small steps, but which change the way we used to move in the world. Yes, and that's what we are trying to do here a little bit. Thank you so much for your time, for your
Thank you all.
energies at the end of the evening. Thank you, Osara, once again for this wonderful gathering and for, really inviting such inspiring persons to a dialogue in Germany. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya, for hosting this in a very beautiful way. And thank you for your questions. And yeah, Osara, also thank you so much. It was an honor. And everybody who was present, yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. And I very much believe in planting seeds, because out of seeds, beautiful plants can grow, and also beautiful ideas can grow out of seeds. And I also think the oceans are formed by drops of water. And if we think of our good thoughts, about change, it starts with small things. And if we have like many drops of water, we have an ocean of ideas, and we can change. We can change the world. I believe that.
Thank you, Patricia.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much for those closing words. They are perfect, and I don't want to interrupt or anything. Thank you both. It was a great pleasure to have you here online, and it was like such an inspiring talk, sharing your works from both of you. I think it's like the amazing step. And yeah, thank you also from my side to all the public, to all the participants here, also for your questions. If any of you is also based in Hamburg or in the surrounding, I just gonna put like a few events which are coming in May here in the chat. You're more invited to also, yeah, come and follow a bit our work here, or what Hamburg is doing for the decolonization process. And I will also put in the chat like the contact possibilities. If you are interested in more, or if you want to follow Osara on Instagram or newsletter,
Please do it. Yeah.
whatever. Thank you again, and for all of you, have a nice evening, and hope to see you soon at another occasion. Thank you.
Good luck with all the good work. Thank you so much.